Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you, Phoebe, and all who are here. There will be time at the end of my remarks for your response and your interest, because it does matter, because my announced topic is hinged to an authorship problem that I think calls for a new approach. The problem is that the William Shakespeare fiction not only prevails, but it always will. And let me show you my evidence. See the cover of Oxford professor Emma Smith's book, The Making of the First Folio, published in 2023, not by Oxford University Press, mind you, but by the Bodleian Library, that epitome of scholarly authority. Read Miss Smith's title, The Making of Shakespeare's First Folio, published according to the true original copies, those are lines that are drawn directly from the folio title page, along with the drawn-out cartoon of the author. The timing of Smith's very engaging book is to honor the 400th anniversary of that work we call the First Folio. The Bodleian has their original library copy, and it's a special reason to put their imprimatur on a study of how this marvel came about. Yet, for all her fascinating inquiry into the process, the contributors, the publishers, the printers, Miss Smith says the barest minimum about Mr. William Shakespeare, the assumed playwright. She smartly states and closes the case, quotes, "The presiding genius of the First Folio is presented only indirectly. Shakespeare is the sum of his writing, not of his biography." I translate that as, the pen wrote the plays. Let's try a different angle. See the heroic size bronze statue of William Herbert, 3rd Earl of Pembroke, that guards the entrance to the old Bodleian. And you can see the people on the left-hand side of the statue. There, you can hardly, they look like little miniatures. Lord Pembroke was the Chancellor of Oxford when the folio was published. He was exceptional in his own right, revered as, quotes, "the greatest Maecenas of learning of any peer of his time or since." And that's an accolade cited by Charlton Ogborne. As King James's Lord Chamberlain, the highest court official, Pembroke had crown authority over theaters and printing presses. The folio, as we know, is dedicated to William and his brother Herbert. Yet, apart from alluding to their political positions and patronage in Smith's book, the Bodleian reveals almost no connection. But I've concluded that there is a connection. In some way, I think that the Bodleian is bound by some crown law to copyright restraints on the folio, or by an inviolable gift agreement with the donors who commissioned and paid for the folio. And I think that is William Herbert and family. If my hunch is correct, then that covenant is sealed. To paraphrase Omar Khayyam, the moving hand hath writ, not all of our scholarly piety or wit will move or wash out a word of it, nor will it move the other great Shakespeare libraries of the world, like the Folger, to defy that covenant. And I think we see that's happening in our own time. Speaking as a retired family historian for hire, I will defend donor family intent. In this case, the priceless gift was a book of, quote, Mr. William Shakespeare's comedies, histories, and tragedies. There is no public right to know who made that gift, or why, or who wrote the fiction, or what secrets it conceals. So where does this leave defenders of the genius playwright Edward de Vere, whose name is missing from the folio? He foretold his fate in many ways, as in Sonnet 72. My name be buried where my body is, and live no more to shame nor me nor you. It seems our Shakespeare's wish has been honored by the folio donors. We must find another way to honor him. For a starter, let's understand Edward de Vere is not the folio William Shakespeare, nor is the folio William Shakespeare only Edward de Vere, a premise that I will try to illustrate for you. And in my closing remarks, I hope to suggest a different way that we might tell the folio's story and who might author that. But for now, let's just take a quick look at the first folio. To lift a Shakespeare phrase, foolery shines everywhere. Some form of the word fool appears over 400 times in the plays of Shakespeare, most often in the greatest ones that we ascribe to Edward de Vere. I call the folio story the tale that shakes the dog. The tale, 11 pages of deliberate foolery to introduce the book, largely contrived by Ben Jonson, the ingenious wit, paid by his good friend, the Earl of Pembroke, to mastermind this brilliant work. For a quick review, those 11 pages, and you can't really read this here, include, the poem facing the title page, as you will see there, the dedication to the noble brethren, and the letter to the readers, both written by Hemmings and Condell, who I believe were collaborators on all this, Jonson's tribute to the author, 2 pages of praise poems, the list of players, and the catalog of plays. And there's more discussion of those 11 pages than all the 890 pages of the plays. So let's look at the folio catalog. 18 plays show here for the first time in any form, notably the first and last in each category, sometimes called the new plays. Those are ones that are highlighted in yellow here. 10 others are substantially different from known quarto versions, and those are the ones that are marked with an asterisk by them. So that means that 28 plays had hands unknown to us to either finish, revise, or even write them. That leaves only 8 early plays that had been staged and published from so-called true original copies. So you might ask me, well, what kind of dog is this? My answer, a mongrel with high DNA of Great Dane. Next question. Did the same author write all the plays in the folio? Well, our respected Oxfordian authority, J. Thomas Looney, did not think so. Looney doubts authorship of several plays. For example, he says, another man has been called in to finish the composite and somewhat inharmonious play of Henry VIII. He shoves out The Tempest to a 24-page appendix at the end of his book, citing, saying, The Tempest is no play of Shakespeare. And citing the Prospero's Rebel speech, he says, even its best passage is simple cosmic philosophy, and as such, the most dreary negativism that was ever put into high-sounding words. So. Looney never took into account an overall vision behind the folio, or that women could have held the pen, but I do. My spotlight now is on 2 family members, Countess Mary Sidney Herbert and Mary Sidney Wroth. The late Margaret Hannay, the Sidney family biographer, doesn't suggest that Mary Sidney contributed to Shakespeare plays, but the other way around. For example, in Antony and Cleopatra, she says, quotes, William Shakespeare borrows from her Antonius for the drama's structure and characterization. Robert Williams speculates that Mary Sidney was Shakespeare. I mean, that's a stretch for me, but I go along with her captive title that the Countess was Ben Jonson's sweet swan of Avon, though of course Ben sets up other decoys. I most appreciate her fine research connecting Sidney ancestors with characters in the plays and actual political figures. As I see that background, no one else alive in the Stuart reign had so deep a living personal memory of Tudor court life as Mary Sidney did, or was so invested in the Tudor legacy. Looney leads us to Henry VIII, so let's go there for evidence of Mary Sidney's direct hand. So here's the setup. The Lord Chamberlain to King Henry has just left them. He was sent to deliver a courtship gift to Anne, a title and £1,000, hinting at more to come. Anne Boleyn feigns to old lady that she has no desire to be a queen. Anne Boleyn: "This is strange to me." Old lady: "Well, there was a lady once, 'tis an old story, that would not be a queen, that she would not for all the mud in Egypt. Have you heard it?" And she goes on: "With your chance, I could overmount the lark. To be the Marchioness of Pembroke, £1,000 a year for pure respect, no other obligation." More of their chat. Anne Boleyn: "By my troth and maidenhead, I would not be a queen." Old lady: "Beshrew me, I would, and venture maidenhead for it, and so would you for all this spice of your hypocrisy." No one can tell me, this old lady, that these lines were written by 40-something-year-old Eddie de Vere. No way. And while I leave Henry VIII on this light note, I must add, it is said this play has more references to scripture than any other in the canon. That, I warrant, is by Mary Sidney's will. Oops, sorry. Now meet Mary Sidney Wroth, who I propose wrote The Tempest. Before I try to back up this incredible claim, let's look at folio family relationships. Please note that the chart that I'm about to show you is only my concept. It is not taken from any source. So all those figures that are framed in red, I believe, were part of the plot, the creation, if you will, of the First Folio. Mary Wroth is the niece and namesake of Countess Mary Sidney. She was the eldest of 11 children of Robert Sidney and aristocrat Barbara Gamage Sidney. Mary's first cousin, as you know, married Susan de Vere, who became her dearest friend. And Mary's cousin William Herbert, well, it's no secret. You can Google it. They were lovers. After her Aunt Mary's death, she bore William twins, a son and a daughter, whose paternity he did not deny. Mary Sidney Wroth and Susan Vere were both born in 1587. They could have met in any number of ways, but most likely through Queen Anne, for whom her father served as Lord Chamberlain, appointed by King James. Susan and her sister Elizabeth were in the Queen's closest circle of noble attendants, and that's not, Mary Wroth would not have been part of that group. Susan was only a year old when her mother died, and her father was banished by the Cecils. She was raised by much older relatives in noble households. Penshurst, the ancestral Sidney country estate where Mary and her siblings were raised, was a world apart, grand yet unpretentious and open-hearted. Ben Jonson, a close family friend and a guest for extended spells at Penshurst, wrote an effusive 102-line praise poem to Penshurst. I recommend it. It's a very beautiful poem. Robert Sidney, named Viscount Lille and Earl of Leicester by King James, was the most important Sidney from a political point of view as Lord Chamberlain to Queen Anne's court. Almost all we know about Susan comes from letters he sent to his wife when he chaperoned Mary and Susan on visits between Penshurst and their respective homes in London. The tone of his letters showed that Sidney's loved Susan like a daughter, but it was well known that Robert never overcame his famous brother Philip's grievances with her father. And no doubt, Susan confided in Mary stories about her father that she never told anyone else. To our day, Penshurst is a welcoming estate to visit. The Lille descendants proudly share family history, but they guard a firmly locked gate to those who would inquire about De Vere connections. So what is there to suggest that Mary Wroth wrote The Tempest? First, see the cover of the Countess of Montgomery's Urania, and then you can read it. Written by the Right Honorable the Lady Mary Wroth, daughter to the Right Noble Robert, Earl of Leicester, and niece to the ever-famous and renowned Sir Philip Sidney Knight, and to the most excellent Lady Mary, Countess of Pembroke, late deceased. Read the meaning of the title as the world or the universe of the Countess of Montgomery. For reference, Urania was the muse of astronomy and astrology, one of those many daughters of Zeus. Mary Wroth's fantasy novella, A Brave Publication for a Woman, came out in 1621 when the Folio was in progress. The title and timing can't be only incidental. The best I can do to connect the Urania fantasy with The Tempest is to show you this map of the Mediterranean in the 17th century and to make a few recognized family connections in Urania. So you can see Morea on the map. If I can move this little guy over here, there's Morea down there. Morea on the map is an Ottoman name for the Peloponnese off of Greece, then part of the Duchy of Venice. Naples is pretty much the same in both fictions. Not that it matters. I mean, it's all fantasy land, and the characters of Urania and The Tempest don't fit in equivalent slots. The central story of Wroth's tale is that Princess Urania unites the family kingdoms of Morea and Naples through her marriage to Stereamus, Philip Herbert. Pamphylia, who's Mary Wroth, who is from Morea, confides in Urania her love for Amphilanthus, William Herbert, son of the Queen of Naples. Mary Sidney. When we meet Urania at the beginning, she is a shepherdess who does not realize she is the daughter of the exiled king of Albania. Does that sound familiar? What Looney doesn't grasp is the fabulous conceit of Tempest, opening the Shakespeare storybook with the banished Duke Prospero conjuring up his rival son Ferdinand to marry his daughter Miranda. The strange father then drowns his book of magic words, save one, and the stories begin. 34 plays later, they end with Cymbeline, that, quotes, inferior play, Looney complains, quotes, comes nearest to The Tempest. There we meet another father-knows-best ruler who drives away his daughter, who is married for love instead of serving his ambition. She is saved by Belarius, Guiderius, Arviragus, and of course Posthumus. It's a storybook ending. The king is contrite, enemies at peace, everyone lives happily ever after, book shut. I said that in closing, I would propose a different First Folio story. We need to write a counterpart to Emma Smith's The Making of the First Folio. So this is sort of my concept. And, try to imagine it. The Making of Shakespeare, First Folio Foolery, In Search of the Soul of the Age, that's a Ben Jonson quote, by Susan Vere Weavers. You've heard enough about foolery, but let's not fool ourselves. The folio is not the sum of the plays or the singular genius of Edward de Vere. If Mary Sidney and Mary Wroth wrote plays, or some part of them, then be sure that other writers and poets are embedded too. It is unthinkable, for an example, that Mary and Robert Sidney's beloved brother Philip is left out of this, but where in the pages is he? Every author's identity throughout the folio has been erased with deliberate intent. Instead, we might respond to Ben Jonson's call, "Soul of the age, arise." And who and what is that then and now? If there were an embodiment of the soul of the age in the 1620s, that had to be Gloriana, the glowing icon of England on top of the world, extolled in the voices of her poets and playwrights, the greatest among them, only a whispered name. In late 1603, shortly after the Queen's death, Oxford wrote to Robert Cecil, quotes, "In this common shipwreck, mine is above all the rest, without sail or anchor." Two decades later, the shipwrecked years of Elizabeth's long 45-year reign had faded from sight for a rudderless generation under King James. They looked back to glory. We must tell the Shakespeare story another way for our time. About the author, who, you ask, is Susan Vere Weavers? Well, it's a pseudonym, of course. I hope for collaborators who would write this book. Truth in the old story is too elusive for any one person to find it in the tangled web. And how to tell a new story is a challenge that I think will take many minds to meet. But why honor Susan Vere in the pursuit? I ask you to reflect on Ben Jonson's epigram published in 1616. Were they that named you prophets, did they see, even in the dew of grace, what you would be, the light and mark unto posterity? Consider the obvious reason to honor her. Had it not been for Susan's marriage to Philip Herbert, she and her family, possessors of de Vere's manuscripts, might never have inspired the Herbert family to give the world this magnificent labor of love. Susan was the catalyst, but Susan, like her father, has been erased from the folio and the Herbert family story. She died young of smallpox at age 42. All of her siblings predeceased her. We don't even have a life portrait to look at, only a sketch by Inigo Jones, but you can see a postmortem likeness of Susan in this great Van Dyck portrait of the Philip Herbert family at Wilton House, painted several years after her death. It helps us visualize who she might have been. So, can it be? Every tribute speaks to her of her enduring mark on posterity. Why? Can it be that she was the moving hand behind the First Folio? The person who got it all together, distributed the manuscripts, worked with all the people who helped edit it? I don't know, but we must find the answer. I leave you with an elegy to Susan by poet William Brown of Tavistock. His call to the world is now to us. In thy name there is a tomb, if the world will give it room. For a Vere, a Herbert's wife, outspeaks a tomb, outlives all life. Thank you. And now for your comments and your response. Thank you.
Does it work? Okay. I have a question that's just a tiny piece. It doesn't really matter, but I'm curious from reading recently about Mary Sidney. You had excellent presentation, by the way. I learned so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
You had mentioned Mary Sidney having stock in keeping the Tudor reign alive. But I thought that the Queen Elizabeth, for lack of a better word, was mean to her mother and her brother.
Yeah,
so why would Mary want to keep the Tudors?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the Queen could be very vindictive, and she was really quite awful to Robert Sidney. I mean, he was posted to Ireland, I believe, and he had all these children at home. He kept having children. Maybe that's why she kept him away. But in any event, he kept asking to come back. He kept asking to come back. And he didn't have enough money, to handle that position, and she wouldn't let him come back. She wouldn't let him come back. But this is the thing. If you look at the history of that family, the history of the Sidneys, they are so deeply embedded in Tudor history. I mean, she was what I call a Tudor Rose red diaper baby. I mean, she literally, her mother was working for the Queen. Her father was working for the Queen. Her uncle, Robert Dudley, well, we know what he was doing, sort of. And her grandfather had been involved. I mean, the connections are just amazing. I mean, there's just nothing like this family. And the Herberts, equally, I mean, if not more so, connected. I mean, Mary Sidney's husband, Henry Herbert's first wife, she was a third wife. His first wife was the sister of Lady Jane Grey. Yeah, I mean, and Anne Boleyn was related, I think, on the Dudley side somehow or other. I mean,
Also, it just brought us up that when you said that, Henry Herbert served as president of the Council of Marshes. Henry Herbert served on the Council of Marshes because he was Welsh, and that's what the council was for. He served with De Vere.
Yeah. I mean, there are just, it's just amazing. I mean, Robin Williams has done a wonderful job of sort of connecting all of these people.
Thank you.
Joanna, that's a beautiful talk. Thank you. Very interesting. But it doesn't quite fit with our friend Looney's view of The Tempest, which he actually decided to give to, he thought was the Earl of Derby, Stanley, wasn't he? And there is this fact that the word strange, it happens in The Tempest 29 times or something.
Right.
And that Ferdinand and Miranda all fit with the marriage of Derby, Stanley, and Elizabeth. What do you think of that? Because that was Looney's theory, and he sort of more or less gave it to Abel Lefranc, didn't he? And said you can have The Tempest.
Yeah.
And there is quite a lot of feeling that The Tempest was related to the Stanleys and with all this strange business.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't talked about Derby, who I think is extremely important in this story because it doesn't, he's not directly part of the Herbert family, but he was, in my view, Derby was the one who loved Edward de Vere, who worked with him the last years of his life, and who probably did any kind of editing on de Vere's plays that are in the First Folio. I think other people might have finished other plays of Edward de Vere, but the anything that was, original, I think Derby oversaw. But I don't think that. I still think that The Tempest was a more contemporary play, that it was written, but that it included, they were trying to mimic not only Edward de Vere, but but William Shakespeare. They had set up this William Shakespeare, decoy, and that's why, when there's all this argument about when this ship was, the Bonaventura was sunk and so forth, whether or not it could have been before or after William Shakespeare died. It's all part of the conceit, it's all part of the deception. They are trying to hide Edward de Vere, not out of malice. There was so much scandal around him and so much pain for the family that I think they really were saving him, not trying to destroy him, but they could not use his name. Yeah. That's my feeling.
So Shakespeare borrowed famously from so many older plays, works. It seems completely conceivable to me that he borrowed something that she had written, right? It would be in line with sort of his natural way of doing things. He sees something, he's intrigued by it, he wants to give it a go.
When you say she, meaning who?
Mary Sidney. Well, actually, I'm referring to the earlier speaker, but yeah, uranium.
Okay.
But what I'm driving at really is the fact that Susan was the youngest daughter, right?
Right.
And she had little or no dowry, and yet this family of high birth embraced her into the family, and I'm wondering if it's because they wanted that connection to the Shakespeare papers, et cetera, whatever there may be, so that they could fulfill their agenda of promoting the well-being of the dynasty or whatever. In other words, I feel like she may have been more valuable not for the dowry she brought, but for her connection to the Shakespeare's body of work.
Right. Well, I think, I'm not quite sure how to answer that. They had tried to arrange a marriage between Bridget Vere and William Herbert, and that didn't go through. So, the families were very close, by the way. I meant Mary Sidney and Susan Vere's mother, Mildred Cook, were very close, as was Mary Sidney's mother to Mildred Cook, and Mary Sidney was very close to Queen Elizabeth. So, I think that she actually loved and admired Edward de Vere, but he caused so much pain in that family. It has to be really, it's a tragedy beyond anything I can conceive of. I keep saying, this is the greatest opera that would ever have been written if somebody could write it.
So, Joella, I just want to add another work to your works that I think should be considered if we're talking about The Tempest.
Can you talk a little bit louder?
Sure. I think there's another book or another work that should be mentioned when we're talking about The Tempest, and that's Strittmatter and Korzybski's book on The Tempest, and establishing, I think quite convincingly, that there is absolute precedent for reading The Tempest as an earlier work that predates, that goes back before de Vere's death. I would start with the hypothesis that's right there on the first folio that says these are Shakespeare's plays. I'm not to say that I'm appreciative of your recognizing potentially new additional hands, but I do want to just stress that when we're talking about The Tempest, I think this is a Strittmatter and Korzybski have put together an amazing
Well,
work.
I totally, listen, I think different people have some very valuable things to say, and by all means, I don't know all the literature. I drew on Looney. Looney pushed this out into an appendix, saying The Tempest is no play of Shakespeare, and claiming that, so I just took that as my point of departure, and I took Countess of Montgomery's Urania, and I do accept other interpretations. I don't know. I keep thinking all of us need to wear those thinking caps that our elementary school teachers said that we needed to wear. I think that. That's all I can say. But I agree. I appreciate your mentioning Roger's book. I apologize, Roger, if I didn't say it.
It's Lynn's book also.
Okay. It's before my time, I think. Any other thoughts?
Not only did Edward de Vere cause the Sidney family pain, but isn't it part of the context that in 1623 the Puritans were gaining much power? King James wished to they wanted to market it to King James as a pro-theater tool, anti-Puritanistic tool. If Oxford's name had been on the plays, people knew he had been a playboy, also that he had been accused of attacking servant boys, etc. It would have been impossible in that context and Thomas Millar brings this up in a paper he wrote in a newsletter a few months ago.
Right. Yeah, and also, so long as so long as Robert Cecil was alive, and he didn't die until 1612, there was a lot of repression of anything to do with Edward de Vere. Yeah.
I just want to raise the possibility that The Tempest was much earlier. There are references that appear to be to it in Johnson's two plays, Every Man in His Humour and Every Man Out of His Humour, and the references in Rowe to why the Bermuda thing is a load of nonsense.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just giving another argument for that.
Thank you.
But
Sorry. I forgot.
No, I'm okay. I think are there any more questions? Or
I think we're going to have to wrap up here.
Okay.
But thank you so much, Joella.
Okay.